Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the FPCJ press briefing. Last November, the government of Japan submitted the proposed plan for the new scientific whale research program in the Antarctic Ocean to the Scientific Committee of the IWC. The IWC Scientific Committee expert panel workshop was held in February to review the plan, and the report of this panel was published yesterday. It is a great pleasure to invite today Mr. Joji Morishita, Japan's Commissioner to the IWC, who will talk about the report. This briefing will be conducted in English only. Before we listen to what Mr. Morishita has to say, please don't forget to turn your cell phones to silent mode. Thank you. Then, Mr. Morishita, please.
Thank you very much. And good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is my great pleasure to be at this Foreign Press Club again to explain about some part of our whaling issue. As just explained, report from expert panel of the International Whaling Commission, which reviewed the Japanese proposal for new research activities in Antarctic Ocean, was published yesterday. The time was 13th of April in UK time, and also at the same time response from Japan to that expert panel report, as well as addendum to the original research plan was also publicized on the website of International Whaling Commission. And we have distributed hard copies of the report itself and our response paper and addendum to the original research plan. Before I start explaining the details or contents of our report and also our response, maybe some background or recap of what happened for the last 1 year might be useful. All those scientific activities or planning of a new research plan was triggered by the judgment by International Court of Justice, the 31st of March last year. The ICJ judgment told Japan that to stop the second round of Antarctic whale research plan called JARPA-2, because JARPA-2 is outside the scope of Article 8 of International Convention for the Regulation of Whaling. The International Convention for the Regulation of Whaling is an international agreement which established International Whaling Commission. So this is a constitution about the conservation and management of whales. And Article 8 is about the so-called special permit whaling activities, the special permit for the scientific activity. Under Article 8, the contracting government of this agreement has authority to issue a permit to catch whales for the scientific purpose. And the ICJ's decision is Japan's JARPA-2 is outside the scope of this Article 8. Just to confirm, or just to avoid a misunderstanding, sometimes the ICJ judgment was reported as a prohibition of so-called scientific whaling in general, or prohibition of future scientific activities, or prohibition of whaling in general. To be exact, the ICJ judgment made a decision about JARPA-2, not about Northwestern Pacific research activities, which are now going on, not about commercial whaling. It is about the second round of Antarctic research activities only. Also, we have to note that ICJ judgment binds the parties to the ICJ case, the particular ICJ case, which are Japan, Australia, and New Zealand. So other countries will not be bound by ICJ judgment unless they make a decision to do so. The same can be said about the International Whaling Commission. The ICJ judgment will not dictate what IWC says or IWC does. Of course, IWC can also make a decision to follow the ICJ judgment. ICJ judgment is also reported that Japan lost all, or Japan has now cannot conduct the research whaling, something like that. Actually, there are many interesting provisions in the ICJ judgment, as I explained at the last opportunity at this very place. For example, one of the contentious issues in the ICJ course was what is the purpose of an international convention for the regulation of whaling. Australia and New Zealand argued that because this agreement or convention was established almost 70 years, the purpose has evolved, changed over the years from, in the current or modern terminology, from the sustainable use of whales to the protection of whales, or conservation of whales. That's the word used. ICJ judgment said very clearly that the purpose of an international convention of a regulation of whaling has not changed, although subsequent resolutions and the schedule changes might have shifted the emphasis between conservation and sustainable use. That means sustainable use is still regarded as one of purposes of ICRW or IWC itself. This is, from our point of view, a positive judgment. Also, in connection with this new research plan, ICJ said in its paragraph 246 that when Japan considers new research plan, please respect the reasoning and conclusion of the ICJ judgment. So assumption is the Japan might be considering new research plan. And if you do that, please, ICJ said, respect the reasoning and conclusion of the ICJ judgment. And conclusion of reasoning includes something like a more detailed explanation about sample size, or more extensive feasibility study about non-lethal studies, or some measures or change of a research plan when if the actual sample size is smaller than planned. Other reasoning and conclusion include strengthen the cooperation with international organizations. There are several of those. And in response to this ICJ judgment, the Minister of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries made a formal statement 18th of April last year. And this stands as a formal position of Japan, as long as the interpretation of the ICJ judgment and also our position about the new research plan. And in Minister's statement dated the 14th of April, Minister, then Mr. Hayashi, who came back his second term as a minister now, said that we confirm the sustainable use of whales as a resource was supported by the ICJ judgment. Therefore, we continue to keep our policy of resumption of sustainable whaling, and for that purpose, we will continue the research activities. There are much more details, and minister's statement is still posted both in Japanese and English on the website of the Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry and Fisheries. So maybe you might like to have a look. And following the statement of Agriculture Minister, government has initiated the drafting of a new research plan. And in its drafting, the scientists and government officials responded the ICJ's reasoning and conclusions in full. And also, in the course of drafting and compiling the research plan, Japanese government consulted extensively with the foreign scientists, and as a result, the draft research plan was submitted to the Scientific Committee of International Whaling Commission and Secretariat of International Whaling Commission on 18th of November last year. At the same time, this is exceptional. The plan or draft research plan was also posted on the website of Japanese government, and also Japanese government asked the Secretariat to circulate the research plan to other members of International Whaling Commission. And this essentially means the plan now is public. In the past, plan was usually handled as a confidential document unto the scientific committee, but we had made a decision that in this particular case, we'd like to secure maximum transparency in the discussion surrounding this new research plan. And responding to the submission of research plan in November last year, the IWC process for reviewing the research plan was triggered. The IWC has its own rule to look at the new research plan, not just Japanese plan and any other plans. This rule is called Annex P. And the Annex P has several provisions, but one of the most important activities by the scientific committee responding to the submission of research plan is holding a panel of experts. And expert panel was formulated with the participation of 10 scientists from many countries, including United States, UK, and Canada, and other places. All those names of experts in the panel is actually included in the report of our expert panel. Now you have in front of you, so you can look at the names of our participants, which is page 47. And the role of those experts are to review and comment on draft research plan. And the meeting of expert panel was held February, starting from 7th of February to the 10th and in Tokyo. The formulation of a meeting is first proponents, Japan, explain the details of a research plan. Then the expert will have a closed meeting to discuss the plan and draft their own report. So the proponents, Japan, are not involved in drafting of panel report itself. And the proponents are also expected to respond to the questions and requests from experts. And we did everything we can do, responded all requests from experts at that meeting. And following the meeting, the experts get together, and again in a closed session, they have compiled the report. Now you have in front. And this report will be now submitted to the scientific committee itself, which will be held from 22nd of May in the United States and San Diego. And the meeting will last about 2 weeks, and our scientific committee will also discuss this issue, and they will write their own report. And the report of the scientific committee will also be made public 2 weeks after the closure of a scientific committee meeting. And the last day of a scientific committee is, I keep forgetting this date, 4th of June, 3rd or 4th of June. So toward the end of June, you will see the report of the scientific committee itself. The panel report, which you have in front of you, will not be changed or modified as a result of a scientific committee discussion. The scientific committee, this report, the panel report, will be used as one of the materials along with our response paper, along with our addendum for the discussion by the scientific committee. And based on that discussion, the scientific committee will compile its own report. And that will be the report you will see at, by the end of June. And the role of a scientific committee is also defined by a legally binding document of International Whaling Commission called Schedule to the Convention. And item 30 or Article 30 of this schedule says the scientific committee will review and comment the research plan. And I'm sure that there will be a question, but legally speaking, scientific committee is not requested either approve or disapprove a research plan. Their role is to review and comment on the research plan. That's a background, very lengthy one, sorry for that. And however, you still need to understand how those procedures and steps are taken by the International Whaling Commission before we go into the report itself. Now you have 2-page explanation, and I will explain in line with or in accordance with this 2-page document, sometimes referring to the 3 documents, which are the report of expert panel and our response paper and the addendum to the research plan. Okay. Yes. And I think I have finished number 1 of a paper you have in front of you. And now let me explain very briefly the contents of expert panel. Sometimes, again, people might expect that expert panel or scientific committee says yes or no to the research plan. However, the contents are not so simple. And they had to go through all the research plan and details and discuss many different issues. And from our point of view, we have pointed out the 3 major features of expert panel report, as you can see in front of you. First of all, the expert panel agreed that the research objectives we put forward in our research plan are important for both conservation and management of whale resources. This is a positive decision from our point of view, and this is one of the most important terms of reference for the experts to look at our research plan. Secondly, however, expert panel asked us additional analysis and works before they actually determine or make some observation about the need of lethal study. the very reason that the expert panel was held is to consider whether the lethal study is justified by our research plan, and the sample size is appropriate from scientific point of view. They said they couldn't make that judgment or observation with the information we have provided up to now. And they have given us 29 additional recommendations or additional tasks for us to conduct. Some of the recommendations, however, include a recommendation about one part of our research activities we have proposed, which is research on prey of whales, the creature called krill, the shrimp-like small zooplankton. And this forms the very basis of our Antarctic marine ecosystem. And we did involve in the research activities in the past on this krill, but we have substantially strengthened our research activities on this zooplankton because we think the study on the marine ecosystem as a whole is very important. And they have made like 16 recommendations about this krill study. In a sense, this will not affect the point of whether lethal study for whales are needed or not, or the sample size is scientifically appropriate or not. So in our response, we have placed our priority and emphasis on recommendations which are directly connected to the point of a lethal study and sample size. So the point is there are many different 29 recommendations. Some of them can be handled in the long-term study throughout the course of our research itself. Others are needed and requested by the panel before or around the scientific committee of this year. So in our response paper, we did our best efforts to respond to all those questions as in detail as possible. And we have provided the detailed timeline and the steps to be taken before, toward, and after the scientific committee, and toward the beginning or initiation of a research plan, which is included in our response paper. And again, addendum is, in a sense, the excerpts from a response paper which are directly connected to the research, draft research itself. I have already explained some part of our response of the government of Japan in your 2-page memo. Again, we have submitted, as of yesterday, our response paper and addendum to the original draft research plan. Both documents are on the IWC website, as I said at the beginning already. And we have put a emphasis on the recommendations which is to do with the lethal study and sample size. And those are if you have a chance to look at the expert panel report, the recommendation numbers 1, 11, 12, 13, and 26 as described in the 2-page memo. And there are intermediate timeline and also priority recommendations. And for those ones, we will strive to complete the recommendations by the beginning of our research itself. Those are recommendations 2, 3, 4, 8, 9, 10, 18, and 22, again, as listed in the 2-page memo. For recommendations mainly related to creel surveys, we will conduct additional analysis and additional works during the course of implementation of a research plan in principle. And those are the recommendation numbers, as you can see just in front of you. So that's the main part of our response paper. Again, you can look at the detail, for more detail in our response paper. Before I finish, maybe I'm sure that you will ask a question like how is your impression about our report of expert panel? So maybe I should try to preempt that question as much as possible. I believe our experts did a very scientific and technical job as they have been expected. And as you might know, oftentimes even a scientific discussion at the International Whaling Commission can become a, I should say, political or emotional because of positions taken by the government. And we recognize that so-called anti-whaling countries oppose any type of whaling under any circumstances. If I paraphrase, that means even if scientifically proven that some species of whales are abundant and can be used in a sustainable manner, they still oppose that whaling. And that was made very clear during the course of International Whaling Commission discussions. And we do recognize that position, but we also want other countries to recognize Japan's position also. And our position is whales are also regarded by some countries, including Japan, Norway, Iceland, some part of the United States, and Russia, as marine resources not different from any other marine living resources. Of course, we have no intention of depleting or endangering this important resource, but sustainable use is our goal. Those positions are different. However, our positions are also legitimate, in line with the ICJ decision, as I said at the beginning, which accepted or which pointed out the one of purposes or objective of International Convention of Regulation of Whaling still is a sustainable use of whale resources. So there are differences. However, in the international negotiations, when we have differences, we try to understand the others and start from the position that we agree to disagree. However, even the scientific committee in IWC, that was very difficult. However, as I said, experts were less affected by this position. And they have given us many positive statements as well as very good scientific and technical advices. So we respect their recommendations, and we will make the best efforts to respond to their recommendations in a good faith and sincere manner, as I just explained. And we will see how that will develop at the scientific committee itself in coming May. Maybe I should stop now, and again, thank you very much for joining this briefing this morning, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Morishita. Now we would like to open the floor to questions. We will receive questions from the foreign press, but one question at a time, please. If you have a question, please raise your hand, and if you are selected, please wait for a microphone, and then give us your name and affiliation before you ask your question. Any question? Yes.
Martin Kölling with the German financial daily Handelsblatt. From now on, do you expect less tensions at the IWC meetings about this question, or do you think that this blockade, mutual blockade, will go on?
If the tension is decreased, I'll be very happy. But I'm seeing probably both symptoms or phenomena toward the more accommodating discussions and also more dispute over this issue. Partly because of ICJ judgment, some of the contentious issues are now legally resolved in a sense. Of course, there could be difference of interpretation, but as we have seen at the last IWC Commission meeting held in Portorož, Slovenia last year, there are many countries who are now or who expressed more willingness to talk about this issue in a constructive manner based on the ICJ judgment. And up to now, and my impression was that was a very good sign, and to some extent I was happily surprised. But some other groups in the International Whaling Commission rather said differently. They strengthened the anti-whaling position. Interesting example, maybe I should give you so that you can have some sense, is there was a discussion about the resolution in Portorož prepared by New Zealand. And in Japan, that was reported as an attempt to put another hurdle for the implementation of Japan's research plan in Antarctic. However, if you step back and look at the resolution, that resolution's contents is to put forward steps for the implementation of a new research plan in response to ICJ judgment. There are some provisions that go over the ICJ judgment from our point of view. However, it's still a steps for the resumption of a research plan. As a result, New Zealand proposal was opposed from both sides. And sustainable use countries like Japan and Norway had the problem of establishing another hurdle which go over or go beyond the ICJ judgment through resolutions. However, the other end of a spectrum thought that resolution is too weak or unnecessary because that would, in a sense, legitimize the resumption of scientific activities on whales. So, toward the end, the IWC could not establish any consensus and went for voting. And interestingly, that draft resolution from New Zealand got a no vote from both ends. And it happened to be that in the middle, or I don't know whether I can say it's in the middle, at least in somewhere between those spectrums, there are enough number to pass that resolution, because the resolution only requires simple majority. So we might be seeing the transition of IWC from just black and white, pro and anti, to a much wider various different positions as a result of ICJ and as a result of discussion at Portorož. So I cannot make any decision at this stage, but the scientific committee might show the continuation of this transition or new dynamics in the IWC, or maybe we just go back to the bad 4 days. We don't know. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, please.
Elaine Lees, Reuters. The fisheries minister this morning said there was the possibility that, depending on what the scientific committee said, that Japan might change its proposal. I know last night you also hinted that this was possible. What sort of changes might be possible? I mean, would this include fewer numbers of whales in the proposal, or is this in fact a loophole for Japan to bow out of whaling altogether?
You try to provoke. Well, I responded to the same question last night when I talked to the Japanese reporters that our research plan, draft research plan, is draft from the page 1 to the end. So all part of the research plan can be improved, amended, or changed in the course of a discussion. We have already included some changes in addendum, including the change of a timing or change of addition to some of the research items. And of course, you are interested in the sample size. And as to the sample size, there were interesting discussion in the panel, maybe you can find from the report. Some experts think that with current, like they concluded, with current information, they cannot make any decision. One of the observing scientists, interestingly, this is from Australia, says the sample size is too small to be meaningful. So how this will develop at the scientific committee will be very interesting. And our position is if the legitimate scientific advice and suggestions are provided at the scientific committee, we will consider to include that suggestion in the form of a change or revision to our research plan. And in theory, that could include sample size, either way.
Any other questions? No more questions? If there's no more question from the foreign press, we also like to receive questions from the embassy people, if you have any. Yes, please.
Thank you for your briefing, Chris Halford from the Australian Embassy. I just wanted, in the first, the 2 pages of where you talk about the response of the Japanese government. So under part 2, subpoint 1, and you talk about the addendum has some of Japan's responses to the expert panel's review, but you just list the numbers that Japan has responded to. I just wonder if you could explain a little bit further. Of course, we can read it later, but it would be interesting to hear from you a summary of what's in there, if that's okay. Thanks.
Okay. Actual responses to the all 29 recommendations starts from page 6 of our response paper. And the beginning 5 pages are summaries, and also we responded in line with the terms of reference of expert panel, so that to show that we have, along with the expert discussion, fulfilled the terms of reference of the expert panel. But the detailed responses to the 29 recommendations actually start from page 6.
Sorry, thank you. That will be helpful. But I wonder if are there any, what would you see as the main points there, the key elements of the response? Is it possible to talk about that?
Okay.
Thank you.
Maybe it's easier to understand if we look at a particular recommendation and how we responded or how we are to respond. The recommendation number 1 on page 6 is one of the most important recommendations we have received from the panel of experts. Essentially, they said that you have to show how much the output of the models or framework that scientific committee is using will be improved by our research activities. In the question in italics, for example, they have SCAA or RMP, those technical jargons. These are established and accepted the computer simulation models, in a sense, in IWC and scientific committee. And they want to have more quantitative analysis, how much our research activities will improve the outputs of those scientific framework. We probably argue that we do understand and we actually try to provide the level of improvement. But sometimes if you are quite certain that how much you improve the result of those scientific framework, maybe you don't need to conduct the research itself. So it's in some sense there are chicken and egg situation. However, we will respond to this question conscientiously and with our best efforts. And what we did in our response paper is toward the end of this page, you can see items A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I. These are particular course of action or items to be tackled by our scientists to respond to this recommendation number 1 itself. So this is the actual analysis items and simulation items. And we have already started these simulations, and we will strive for the submission of actual results of a simulation at or before the scientific committee. Therefore, the result itself is not included in this response paper. The response paper, as to this particular recommendation, set forth a course of action and timeline and what we will do toward the scientific committee itself. For other recommendations, sometimes we simply said, yes, thank you very much for your recommendation. We include your recommendation in our new research plan. And that is reflected in our addendum, which is supplementary document to the research draft itself. So depending on the questions, our way of response might be a little bit different. In a sort of a simple summary is included in table 1 of our response paper, starting from page 24. So this is a sort of simple summary of our responses to the 29 recommendations, which include also timelines. So this table might be useful for you to look at. Also, because we're looking at toward the end of our response paper, we have included many chart and schematic presentation of our research itself for the promotion of understanding of this very comprehensive research activities. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry for being late, but my name is Uwe Schwering with ARD German Television, public broadcaster. I want to come back because it puzzles me, to the sample size. What I get from the wires is that you're intending, or Japan is intending, to take like 333 minke whales. Now, even if you want to do a telephone survey with human beings, you need like 1,000 or 1,200 probans. I don't want to compare human beings to whales, but for such a vast area like Antarctica, 333 whales to be taken can't be enough. Now, the current status of the discussion, you can't change this number again. It can't go up now because it's counterproductive. That can only mean that you have to stop whaling in Antarctica altogether now. Otherwise, it would simply hint to commercial whaling. How do you get out of this mess? Thank you.
Thank you very much. The scientific reasoning of sample size 333 was provided very in detail in our research plan itself. I can say that the sample size could change depending on many different factors. And my favorite example is to try to assess the average weight of a Tokyo resident. And we have 120, not million, 12 million or 30 million people, something like that, around Tokyo metropolitan area. And if all the weight of all the people is the same, so uniform, all the size of a Tokyo resident is a uniform, same, say 60 kilo. You only take one sample to get accurate estimate. And when the weight varies from very small to very big, and the change or variation is very wide, you have to take larger number of samples, simply said. And because of a past collection of data, we have some sense how the particular biological parameter, in this case age and sexual maturity of minke whales, distribute on the around its true number. And you might have statistical jargon about logistical distribution or those things. And if we have a pretty good concentration of a true age or true sexual maturity to particular part of a minkies, the number of samples could be very small. And our numbers, 333, was calculated based on that theory, in a sense, and also based on data we have accumulated through Java and Java 2. So you cannot say in general term you need at least 2,000 or 3,000 samples to come up with some kind of a data from questionnaire or samples. It depends on the again the variation of or range of a variation of a particular items you like to estimate. And in this case of minkies, that happened to be the number we came out. And if also another factor that could affect the sample size is how accurately do you like to estimate the final output in the case of age. Do you like to have output like this animal is probably in its 20s or its 30s? So the minimum unit of differentiation is 10 years. Or do you like to see the minimum differentiation of 1 year? Or do you like to see the minimum differentiation of a month? then the sample size will be very different. And all those factors combined, we came up with this number. So again, it's explained in detail in the appendix of our original research draft. Hopefully, this answers your question. I'm sure that you will not be totally convinced. But there are no general rule that 1,000 is important sample size. But there are some maximum, sorry to be technical, but you don't need to take huge number of samples, like millions or tens of thousands, because as you accumulate the number of samples, the accuracy or improvement of accuracy decreases by unit. So it's like this curve. So increasing the size of samples by tenfold at this part will not improve the outcome too much. So it's, you are making too much effort or spending too much cost just to simply get a very small amount of changes or small amount of accuracy improvement. But if you are looking at this part, small number change will give you a huge improvement in the estimation. And in our case, probably we are looking at the curve before it flattens out. And that, after that, the increase over too many sample size will not affect too much. So that's the reason oftentimes the many of the sampling activities, including the human questionnaire type, is you can see that usually the several thousand or something like that, because the increase furthermore will not make a big difference in the accuracy of a final outcome.
Any other questions? Yes.
I am from Kantachi from American Embassy. I have two questions. One is, could you tell us your view on how the members of the expert panel, proponents and observers were chosen, and the members of the upcoming scientific committee meeting, and that's fair to the government of Japan? And number two, I think it's from yesterday's Associated Press article quoting you as saying scientific committee is more political than IWC panel, and that I think that might have been on the other way around. Would you please confirm?
Thank you. The panel members, in the Annex P, there are procedures established for the choice of a panel members. And the panel members are to be decided by a group of scientists, specifically the past 4 chairmen or chairwomen of a scientific committee, and also the scientific chief of a secretariat of an International Whaling Commission. And they review the original research draft and decide what kind of expertise are needed in the review of a research plan. Then they will ask around our experts, mainly outside of International Whaling Commission, who has expertise in a particular field of a research plan. For example, the research plan include DNA analysis. They try to find some DNA scientists. In our case, we have an extensive creel survey, so they had to find out the scientists who are knowledgeable about creel science in the Antarctic Ocean. And they contact the pool of a possible candidate, and when if the candidate are willing to join the panel, and if their timing or if they are available at the timing of expert panel, they join the expert panel. And as a result, the 10 experts you can see in the expert panel report was chosen. So it's not like the expert just raise their hand and I like to be a part of the expert panel. It is, or they are to be selected through the process established by Annex P. And the intention of Annex P is try to establish a system to get as neutral scientists and as scientists with a lot of experts as possible. Observers to the meeting will not go through that process. And as you can see, again, from the list of participants at the expert panel, observers came from many different countries. They can just say, I like to observe the meeting, and then they can join. However, they are not allowed to join the drafting of an expert panel report itself. Like the proponents cannot join the drafting of expert panel. So in that sense, observers are there to observe the meeting, and they are not playing any active role in compiling the panel report you have in front of you. The members of the scientific committee, there are no, well, essentially no selection process. So if your government says that you'll be part of a delegation, that scientists will join. And if you like to come to the scientific committee, and if you can find some government who accept you, you can come to the scientific committee. And no scientific credentials or PhD degree are required. However, of course, the scientific discussion, whether it's political or not, is highly required high degree of expertise in science. So if non-scientists or those who are not accustomed to the scientific committee come to the scientific committee, you'll be very bored in a very short time. And also they can accommodate so-called local scientists. And at the coming scientific committee in San Diego, so there could be many like graduate students in the neighborhood of San Diego meeting conference venue. And of course they are not joining as active member, but they can come and observe how the international scientists or international organizations discuss many different issues. So in a sense, the scientific committee itself is an open forum. On the other hand, expert panel is quite limited, and selection of a member follow the Annex P process. So that's the difference, and that's why I said the expert panel is expected to do less political job of looking at or reviewing the draft research plan from technical and scientific aspect, while the scientific committee oftentimes the scientist also carries or have to follow the national positions about whales and whaling in the scientific committee. They follow that. That's why you see oftentimes very sometimes political discussion. Of course, the scientific committee has been striving to make its discussion as scientific as possible. Does that answer your question, Kanda-san? Thank you.
Since we only have 1 minute, I'd like to just have one final question. If there's no more question, I'd like to close today's briefing session. Thank you very much, Morishita.
Thank you very much. Oh, one thing. Scientific committee is closed for the press, so sorry. If you can't, you still cannot look at what scientific committee is done. Wait for the report to come.